Donald Trump tweeted the stimulus rug right out from under the stock market later today when he basically closed down negotiations with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and temporarily dashed the hopes that we will get a fresh round of fiscal stimulus, which would require more monetary stimulus before the election. Now, of course, the election is just 4 weeks away, right? Can the drug addicts on Wall Street, hold off for another 4 weeks without going into stimulus withdrawal? So far, it doesn't look that way because, when you got a drug habit as big as the one that Wall Street has, anything that delays the next fix, right, could really send you over the edge. And in fact, from a technical perspective today, we had an outside reversal day. The markets took out yesterday's high this morning when the market was up. And not only did we close lower on the day, but we closed below the lows from the prior day, by definition, making an outside reversal day. This is not a good technical pattern. In fact, it's quite bearish. And I would expect to see some follow through. In fact, Donald Trump, in his tweet, pretty much invited some follow through, because one of the comments that he bragged about is kind of like why we don't even need the stimulus, was that the stock market was near record highs, right? He bragged about how strong the economy was and how the market was at record highs, meaning that we don't really need the stimulus because we're doing well on our own. Well, I would say that the only reason the stock market is near record highs is because of the stimulus. In fact, one of the few things that the stimulus actually stimulates is the stock market. Trump is trying to claim that the stock market is strong because the economy is strong. It's actually the reverse. The stock market is strong because the economy is weak. It's the weak economy that is driving the stimulus. And without the stimulus, the stock market would actually be much lower to reflect the weakness in the economy. Because again, the stimulus can't make a weak economy strong, but it can provide more air into a stock market bubble. And that's what's been going on. Although I don't like Trump's strategy for why he is walking away from talks with the Democrats, because he's claiming that Nancy Pelosi just wants too big a stimulus, right? The delta between where the president is and where Pelosi, the Democrats are, is $600 billion, right? Donald Trump tweeted that he's willing to sign on to a $1.6 trillion stimulus, but the Dems are holding tight. They insist on $2.4 trillion, and there's an impasse, and the president won't budge, and so he's leaving negotiations. And the problem is, once you accept the false premise that government stimulus actually helps the economy, that it really is a stimulus, right, then you've kind of lost the argument. Because if borrowing and printing $1.6 trillion, if that's a good thing, why isn't borrowing and printing $2.4 trillion a better thing, right? Because you put the Republicans in the position of arguing that $2.4 trillion is too much of a good thing. That somehow, if we just create $1.6 trillion out of thin air and spend it, that's really going to help. But if we push it to 2.4, it's actually going to hurt. Why? I mean, when does something good suddenly become something bad? Now, I know what Trump was trying to say is, well, the extra $600 billion, that's just going to bail out Democratic states. It's going to help them out of a mess that is unrelated to COVID. But if the people in those states are going to take that money and spend it, and if just spending money is good for the economy, then why isn't that good? I mean, what difference does it make why the money is being doled out? If it just benefits the economy the minute it's being spent, then what is the real rationale? Is it all partisan? Is it all political? I mean, that's kind of how it looks, is that this is all about politics, that the president doesn't want to help the Democrats because there's an election coming, and he's willing to sacrifice the good of the country for political partisanship. See, if Donald Trump took a principled stance, and when I mean Donald Trump, it's not just Trump. I don't want to single him out because he's got a lot of company with other rhino Republicans who have also signed on to this Keynesian nonsense. But if Trump and the Republicans took a principled stance against stimulus, and instead of being in favor of 1.6, were in favor of nothing, they said, we are not going to print money and run up the debt in order to artificially boost the economy now with long-term negative consequences. If they told the voters the truth and stood on principle, then at least their position would make sense. And it wouldn't look partisan. It would look like they were standing for something. But by agreeing in principle that we need more stimulus, well, then you just look stingy by not willing to provide it, or you just look like you're putting your own political interest ahead of the interest of the country. You know, it's hard to argue, too, that the reason that you're opposed to the 2.4 trillion is because it unnecessarily runs up the debt. I mean, once you've agreed to an extra 1.6 trillion, what's an extra 600 billion? I mean, what difference does it make? In fact, speaking about the national debt, this week, for the first time, the national debt topped $27 trillion. You know, it's now up $4 trillion this year in 2020. And the year's not even over yet. We still have a quarter left, basically. I mean, I think we could end up with $5 trillion in debt in 1 year. $5 trillion. If you think about that number, the national debt didn't even hit $5 trillion until I think the end of the Clinton administration, early in the George W. Bush administration. So it took all those years just to get a national debt of $5 trillion. And here we rack it up in a single year. And in fact, since Donald Trump took office, the national debt is up almost $7 trillion. Remember, it just turned to $20 trillion, right? After he was inaugurated, or right around the time, or maybe just before. And I think by the time Donald Trump finishes his first term, which is probably going to be his only term, but by the time he finishes that term, he will have added more to the national debt in 4 years than Barack Obama did in 8. And Barack Obama was the biggest deficit spender in history. Barack Obama doubled the national debt, meaning that he added as much debt in 8 years as all the presidents that preceded him did since the birth of the Republic, right, over 200 years ago. And Donald Trump has already outdone him, or will outdo him, in half the time, in just one term. Now, of course, the sad part about it is this record isn't going to last, because if Biden wins, not only will he probably outspend Trump in his first term, he may outspend Trump and Obama combined in his first term. But in any event, given how much these deficits are spiraling out of control, it doesn't make any sense for the Republicans to somehow say the reason that they object to the extra $600 billion is because of the national debt. I mean, come on, who's going to believe that? No one gives a damn about the national debt. So it doesn't make any sense that the Republicans are not compromising with the Democrats, given that they've already compromised and agreed with the Democrats on principle anyway. And again, it's not just the budget deficits that are exploding out of control. It's the trade deficits. And in fact, you know, that's the other thing that the stimulus stimulates is our deficits, our trade deficits. Look, I am not saying that people won't temporarily benefit from the stimulus. They will. I mean, it doesn't benefit the economy, right? The stimulus doesn't make for a more vibrant economy. It doesn't lead to more production of wealth. We don't get more goods produced, more services provided because we crank up the printing presses.